At the Christmas party, my drunken husband told me, the best Christmas gift would be your death. The next day, I canceled the house financing, emptied the account, and smiling disappeared, leaving only a note. No one noticed, but she was already broken when they lit the Christmas tree lights. Eleanor was 38 years old and lived in a house that smelled of the band, polished wood, and secrets. She had it all: a magazine-worthy kitchen, a room with a city view, expensive dinners, inherited jewels, first-class travel, but inside she had nothing. No one asked about her laughter. No one stopped to see if she ate, not even her husband. That morning, while the organizers decorated the hall with golden garlands and a catering team set up a table with wine-reduced lamb, she ironed her own dress. Not because she lacked assistance, but because ironing herself had become impossible. "Are you going to wear that?" Victor asked from the dressing room door. His tone had the sharpness of a razor. She turned slowly. She wore an emerald green dress with an open back and lace sleeves. Elegant, subtle, classic. "Yes." "Why?" Victor smiled, but his eyes didn't match the gesture. "It looks like you're going to a memorial service, not a party." And he left without waiting for an answer. Victor's humiliation wasn't explosive, it was elegant. He didn't yell, he didn't shove, he didn't break things. He just destroyed slowly, like someone withdrawing oxygen from a flower, so it dies without anyone noticing. Eleanor stood there, looking at her reflection. She felt the customary pang in her chest, that whisper of doubt that was already part of her routine. What if she really looked bad? What if she was exaggerating? What if he was right? But something inside her didn't react the same way that night. She didn't cry, she didn't shrink, she didn't fall apart. She just took a deep breath and applied her makeup as if nothing had happened. She had learned to smile without the emptiness showing. The party began at sunset. Luxury cars arrived one after another. Guests brought imported bottles, tailored dresses, fake smiles, and hollow desires. Victor, as always, was the perfect host. He laughed loudly, greeted people confidently, and strolled arm in arm with his assistant, Veronica, a young blonde with bright eyes who seemed more comfortable in her own skin than Eleanor herself. "And Eleanor?" one of the guests asked. "Oh yes, she must be around," Victor replied while pouring a drink for Veronica. Eleanor saw everything from afar. She smiled for a photo. She pretended to take a call. She greeted a couple of businessmen. Everything on autopilot. "Do you want me to tell Veronica to be more discreet?" her sister-in-law, Iris, asked her in a low voice, seeing her discomfort. Eleanor shook her head. She no longer had the strength to pretend to be hurt by what she had stopped caring about. Victor approached her almost at the end of the night. He had been drinking, but not enough to lose control. He leaned toward her with his glass in hand, like someone sharing an intimate joke. The murmur of the music enveloped everything. No one was listening to them. "You know what the best Christmas gift would be?" he whispered. She looked at him without answering. He moved a little closer with a perfect smile and told her, "Your death." Eleanor didn't blink, didn't frown, didn't step back. She just smiled slightly, like someone listening to something irrelevant. And in that instant, something changed. Victor left without waiting for a reaction. It was his custom to shoot and leave, but this time, he didn't feel the impact. He didn't feel like he had won, and that unnerved him. Eleanor stayed at the party for a few more minutes. She wandered around the garden, heard hollow laughs. She watched Veronica caress Victor's arm. She observed how everyone danced with glasses in hand, oblivious to the hell hiding behind the walls. And then, without a word, she went up to her room. She took off the dress calmly. She removed her makeup like every night. She put the jewels back in their case, and before sleeping, she looked out the window. The city shone in silence. The lights flickered as if they knew what was coming. At 6 a.m., Eleanor was already up. She put on a simple coat, grabbed her purse, and left the house without a sound. The chauffeur was still sleeping. She walked 2 blocks, took a taxi, and arrived at the bank minutes after it opened. "Good morning. I want to close all joint accounts and transfer the funds to my personal account." "Do you wish to close the accounts, ma'am?" the executive asked, surprised. "Yes, all of them." "Are you sure?" "Completely." Then she went to the notary. She canceled the financing for the house, the second residence, the yacht Victor used to project success. No one could stop her. No one was looking for her. No one imagined what she was doing, and that gave her power. When she returned home, it was almost noon. The party had been dismantled. Confetti remnants on the floor, dirty glasses, misplaced armchairs. Victor was sleeping in his study. Veronica was gone. The cleaning staff avoided making noise. Eleanor went up to her room, packed a small suitcase, wrote a note, and left it on the bed. She didn't take many things, just what was necessary. A coat, some cash, documents. She put on dark glasses, went down the service staircase, and took another taxi. Before leaving, she looked at the house one last time. That place where she was ignored, annulled, used as a decoration for success. That place she would never return to. The letter said, "Gift granted. The one who permitted your abuses is dead. The one who leaves wants to live." When Victor woke up, hours passed before he noticed her absence. He thought Eleanor must be shopping or perhaps seeking attention. He didn't call her. He didn't ask about her until he received an alert from his bank. Account empty. He called the manager. No answer. He dialed his lawyer. No one had any idea. When he checked the financing papers, he realized something was terribly wrong. He ran to the bedroom, searched the closet. Her clothes were there, but small items were missing. The carry-on bag, the passport, her favorite perfume. And there it was. On the bed, folded precisely, was the note. Victor said nothing. He remained motionless, reading the same sentence over and over. Gift granted. Outside, the Christmas lights still hung from the trees, but inside that house there was no spirit left, no family, no power. Only silence and an impossible void to fill, because something told him that this time, Eleanor was not coming back. Not as before, not as his shadow. And though he didn't know it yet, his downfall had just begun. The next morning did not bring sunshine. It brought calls, it brought doors banged with impatience, it brought the beginning of the collapse. Victor woke up with a knot in his stomach, and the feeling that something beyond the financial was slipping through his fingers. He got up without breakfast, his eyes swollen from lack of sleep, and locked himself in his office. He called the bank, the accountant, his lawyer, his main partner. No one had answers. The accounts were empty, the financing canceled, and financial scrutiny was starting to smell irregularities. All in less than 24 hours, as if someone had been planning it in silence for weeks. As if Eleanor had stopped being his ornament and become his shadow. "Where is she?" he yelled at Veronica when she entered his office with a folder of reports. "Who? Eleanor. Where the hell is she?" Veronica stepped back. Not out of fear, but out of disgust. "She left, Victor. Everyone knows it. They're talking about it. No one says it to your face, but they're talking about you. What are they saying? That you scared her away? That you lost her? That she left you because you aren't what you pretend to be." Victor hit the desk with his fist. He wasn't used to not controlling the narrative. He always managed the story, but this time, he had lost the pen, and the worst part was he didn't even know how. A new life in the shadows. While he crumbled in his bubble of false power, Eleanor was breathing a different kind of air. Many miles away, she arrived with a backpack on her shoulder at an area of the city where no one would recognize her. Where the roofs were tin, children played barefoot in the dirt, and bread was shared as if it were treasure. There were no Christmas lights, only silence, the smell of gas, and clothes hung on makeshift ropes. She knocked on a swollen wooden door and waited. A woman with her hair pulled back, and a suspicious look answered. "Yes. I'm looking for Martha. I was told they rent rooms here." The woman observed her from head to toe, not for her clothes, but for her attitude. Eleanor didn't look like she belonged there, but she didn't look dangerous either. Just tired. "Advance payment?" "Yes, 1 month." She opened the door. The room had a single bed, a plastic table, and a broken window. The walls smelled of dampness, and there was no hot water. Eleanor paid without haggling, without asking for more. That night, she slept hugging her bag without turning on the light. For the first time in years, no one was waiting for her, and paradoxically, that made her feel more alive. The next day, she walked through the neighborhood looking for a store, something to eat, and found a small sign. Healing Hands Foundation. She knocked on the door. A woman with a warm face and curly hair answered. "Can I help with anything?" Eleanor asked. The woman looked at her in surprise. "Are you a volunteer?" "I want to be." The foundation was a repurposed hall. It had shelves with used clothes, a small kitchen, and a makeshift playroom. Women arrived there with their children, with bruises, with broken backpacks, with shame. There was a strange peace in that place, a feeling that pain was shared and therefore less heavy. Eleanor started by washing dishes, organizing clothes, and looking after children. She listened without judging, observed, and slowly began to shed the remnants of the woman she had been. The one who put on makeup to please, the one who stayed silent to avoid discomfort, the one who survived but didn't live. One afternoon, while picking up toys from the floor, a boy with a portable oxygen tank approached her. He looked about 8 years old, with huge eyes and a gap-toothed smile. "What's your name?" he asked with a halting voice. Eleanor. And yours. Ethan. From that day on, Ethan didn't leave her side. He told her stories of Martians, showed her drawings, and offered her candies. I have a complicated illness, he once said without drama. I can't run or play soccer, but I can think and dream. Do you dream? Eleanor didn't know how to answer him. She slowly began to get to know the other women. One of them was Rosa, a mother of 2 girls with a black eye she refused to cover. Aren't you ashamed to show yourself like that? A woman in the dining line asked her. I was ashamed to stay, Rosa replied. Eleanor listened to these stories as someone waking up from anesthesia. What was once invisible to her now had a name, a face, a smell. It broke her heart to see a mother crying because she didn't have milk. To see a 6-year-old girl looking after her brother, as if he were her son. To see a woman with cancer imploring for a medical appointment that never arrived. One afternoon, Eleanor was organizing food when she overheard a quiet conversation between Martha and another volunteer. They say that rich lady's husband, what's his name? The real estate guy is in trouble. The press is hounding him. That they can't find the wife who disappeared, and there's money that doesn't add up. Eleanor froze. What's his name? The other woman asked. Victor. Victor Sterling. She felt a tingling sensation in her stomach. She slowly approached the dining room television. They were turning it on. A local news report showed images of Victor leaving a building surrounded by reporters. Is it true your wife left you? Why was the financing canceled? Where is the money? Is the company bankrupt? Victor didn't answer. He walked as if the questions bounced off him, but his face was no longer the same. He looked tired, pale, irritable. Eleanor lowered her gaze, not out of fear, but out of secondhand embarrassment. That night, in her room, she opened a notebook and wrote, I saw him today. And he is no longer so great, nor so strong, nor so feared. He is just an empty man seeking control in a world that no longer belongs to him. The foundation began to notice the change in Eleanor. Her smile was more real, her posture firmer. She had ideas, proposals. She started organizing talks, giving cooking classes, teaching how to write formal letters. She had a voice, and the other women began to listen. Rosa approached her one day while they were folding clothes. I don't know where you come from, but you're also escaping from something, aren't you? Eleanor looked at her. I'm rebuilding myself. That's also a form of escape, Rosa said, and they laughed. Ethan arrived with a drawing. Look, he told her. It's a castle, but without bad kings. Only a queen who knows how to fight with words. Eleanor hugged him. Weeks passed. Everything seemed to fit into a new rhythm until a new woman arrived at the shelter. Her face was gaunt, her dyed blonde hair messy, and her eyes full of shame. My name is Veronica, she said. I'm here because I'm alone. It took Eleanor 5 seconds to recognize her. The assistant, Victor's shadow, the woman who strolled arm in arm with her husband while Eleanor broke inside. Veronica didn't recognize her. Eleanor's hair was darker. She wore no makeup. Her clothes were simple. Eleanor remained silent. That night, Martha turned on the television. A special report was talking about Victor. A woman has declared she has a daughter with Victor Sterling, who suffers from a serious illness. The scandal grows while the whereabouts of his wife, Eleanor, remain unknown. Eleanor swallowed hard. Veronica from the dining room table murmured, Damn Victor. He always said he would help me, that Chloe would be fine, that everything would be sorted out, and now he won't even answer. Ethan, who was listening in silence, asked, Did you know him too? Veronica nodded. Much more than I should have. Eleanor got up from the chair and went out to the patio. She looked at the dark sky, felt the wind on her face. The battle was just beginning, but she was no longer the same, and now he didn't have anywhere to hide either. Secrets and connections. The press didn't stop harassing him. Microphones waited for him at the door of every building he entered. Cameras captured every gesture, every forced sigh, every glance that tried to look calm. Victor became an uncomfortable face for television. His smile no longer convinced. His expensive suits looked out of place, as if they carried the taint of something much deeper than the financial scandal. He couldn't allow the narrative to crumble. He hired a new team of lawyers and paid an absurd sum to a digital reputation agency to clean up his image. Social media began to fill with posts about his pain over Eleanor's disappearance, his incomprehension of the situation, his supposed support for charitable organizations. All lies. All fabricated. All part of a campaign to continue controlling the narrative. But this time, the public wasn't buying the story so easily. Eleanor watched from afar. In the foundation's small dining room, Every night she watched television with Martha, Rosa, Ethan, and Veronica. No one suspected who she really was. Her face, without makeup and with her hair pulled back, did not resemble the woman in the magazines, and that protected her. Veronica didn't talk much. She kept busy washing clothes, preparing food, organizing medicines. But one night, when she thought no one was listening, she broke her silence. "I can't take it anymore," she suddenly said while cleaning a table. "I feel like I'm exploding inside." Martha looked at her curiously. "What's wrong?" "Chloe is worse," she replied with a broken voice. "I don't have money to pay for the treatments. Victor doesn't reply to my messages, doesn't answer calls, he just sends lawyers. He says he'll resolve it, but he does nothing. I didn't want this to be known, but it's already in the media. Everyone already knows I have a daughter with him." The other women looked at each other. Eleanor said nothing, but her chest burned. "You have a daughter with Victor Sterling?" Rosa asked, not hiding her surprise. "Yes. I had her when I worked with him. I was young, foolish. He promised me many things, that he would leave his wife, that we would travel, that everything was real love. I believed him. Then I got pregnant. He told me he would support me, to keep everything a secret, that he would do right, and so I did. Chloe grew up not knowing who her father was. Now she's sick, and he just hides as if all this were an inconvenience to his schedule." "What does the girl have?" Eleanor asked without looking directly at her. "Leukemia. It's aggressive. She's already lost her hair. She's exhausted. I don't know how to keep going." Silence filled the room. Only the dripping of a poorly closed faucet could be heard. "And he's not going to help you," Eleanor finally said. "That type only acts when it suits him, and when he does, it's because he plans to profit." Veronica looked up. "Do you know him?" "More than he would like." Eleanor got up from the table and went out. She walked to the patio, lit a cigarette she had been hiding for days, and took a deep breath. She hadn't smoked in years, but tonight she needed it. The feeling of contained rage dissolved with each exhale. Victor, for his part, pretended. He gave exclusive interviews from his office. He used a deep, measured voice, the voice of a wounded man. He spoke of Eleanor as if she were one more victim of his disappearance. He showed himself with Chloe during a quick visit to the hospital, bringing balloons, sweets, a camera that recorded everything. "We're going through a difficult time," he would say. "My daughter, my little girl, is the most important thing now. I will do everything to save her." Everything was a setup. Veronica was not present. She wasn't notified. Chloe barely understood what was happening, and Victor left after 5 minutes, leaving behind a bag of gifts and a production team that would edit the images to make him look like a devoted father. The lie was bleeding, but he knew how to put on makeup. At the foundation, the days became denser. Rosa arrived one morning with a pale face. "My husband came last night," she told Eleanor. "He asked me about you. He asked if you were who he thought. And what did you tell him?" "That I didn't know anything. But he grabbed me hard. He said he had heard something on the news, that there were connections, that this whole place is a facade." "A facade for what?" "I don't know. He just said, 'There are things you don't understand, Rosa. You're playing with fire.'" Eleanor felt a chill. She looked around. Martha was talking to a new woman. Ethan was sleeping in the corner with his oxygen tank. Everything seemed normal, but something was starting to move beneath the surface. That same night, Rosa didn't return. She didn't answer calls. She didn't appear the next day. No one knew anything. "Maybe she left with her daughters," Martha said. "Maybe she got scared." But Eleanor felt something else. It wasn't fear, it was a warning. 2 days later, Ethan sat next to her with a notebook in his hands. "Can I tell you something?" "Of course." "My dad was friends with a very rich man. They worked together, but one day my dad died in an accident. They told me it was the car, that it swerved, but I know something isn't right. He didn't drink, he didn't speed. He was afraid of something. A few weeks before, he told me that if anything happened to him, to take care of Mom." Eleanor listened in silence. "What was your dad's name?" "Gerald Peterson." The name hit her like a brick. Gerald Peterson had been one of Victor's first partners in his real estate company. He had disappeared off the map years ago. It was said that he had sold his share, that he had gone to another country, that he had left by his own decision. Eleanor felt everything connecting. Victor, Veronica, Gerald, Ethan, Rosa. The pieces weren't loose, they were just hidden. "And your mom?" "She died too, but it wasn't at home. She died in a clinic. They told me she was sick, but I never saw her again. They just said she left, that she couldn't see me." "Do you remember the name of the clinic?" "It was something with an elegant name. It had a cross at the entrance. White, very white." Eleanor searched her memory. She had accompanied Victor to one of those clinics when he was visiting medical investments. He would talk about philanthropy, donations, humanitarian services. All a facade, all an excuse to launder money. That night, she searched the name online. New Life Clinic, property of the Sterling Group. The same group that now had fiscal problems. The same one Victor used to hide his shady businesses. Rage tightened her chest. Ethan didn't know it, but his story had deeper roots than his young age could understand. Ethan's mother had died in one of Victor's clinics. Gerald, his father, had been his partner. And now the boy was living in a foundation with an illness that was slowly consuming him. Abandoned, ignored. While Victor continued giving interviews with a marble smile, Eleanor closed the computer and wrote in her notebook. Lies bleed, and the blood always finds its way. Victor had built an empire on human ruins. He had hidden women, he had bought silence. He had used his own daughter's illness as a shield, but he couldn't hide anymore. She was going to unmask him. Not with screams, not with scandals, but with truth, with evidence, with stories, because the victims had names, and this story was just beginning. The ultimate betrayal. Eleanor didn't sleep that night. Ethan's words, the documents found, Veronica's trembling voice. Everything piled up in her head as if the universe had been shouting truths to her that she had chosen to ignore for years. The clinic, that name, New Life. She remembered it clearly. Victor had mentioned that clinic as part of his social work. She never questioned too much. In those days, she only listened and nodded, like a spectator in her own life. The air in the room was dense. The small window only let in the distant sound of stray dogs and a poorly tuned television. She took her notebook, writing quickly. Loose words, names, approximate dates, questions, and a phrase at the bottom of the page. I won't run away. Not this time. The next morning, she requested an appointment at the New Life Clinic. She said she wanted to apply as a volunteer to help in the nursing area. She brought a modest resume, without striking titles with a false name. Her voice was firm, her gestures gentle. Martha accompanied her to the entrance and wished her luck without knowing the true purpose of her visit. The clinic's facade was impeccable. White minimalist, with well-kept gardens and instrumental music playing in the reception. Everything seemed designed to transmit peace, but Eleanor had already learned that what is cleanest on the outside often hides the dirtiest on the inside. She was greeted by a young nurse with an immaculate uniform and a kind expression. Do you have medical experience? She asked. I have worked in a community foundation, providing emotional and logistical support. I can administer basic medications, take vital signs, and assist in therapeutic activities. Perfect. We need support in the special care wing. They made her sign papers with confidentiality clauses. They gave her a badge with the name Laura F. and assigned her a small locker with a basic uniform. Eleanor felt like she was in another life, as if everything before had been a dream or a nightmare. During the first days, she did exactly what was expected of her. She smiled. She assisted with minor tasks, carried trays of food, helped patients walk down the halls, and quietly observed. There were restricted areas, doors with codes, locked files. Everything too shielded to be just a rehabilitation clinic. The patients were mostly elderly, some in good condition, others completely disconnected from reality. But something caught her attention from the first day. Not all of them were sick. Some seemed perfectly lucid, but sedated, as if someone was keeping them on pause. After a week, Eleanor befriended a nurse named Beatrice. An older woman, kind, with a slow gait and a low voice. Do you know how many patients have been here for more than 10 years? She whispered in a hallway. 10 years, Eleanor asked, feigning surprise. Oh, more. Some don't have family. Others do, but they don't want them to leave. Sometimes they get rid of them for money, inheritances, legal problems, and here they are as if they never existed. That night, Eleanor sat on the bed in her room at the clinic. She didn't sleep there, but she used the space to rest between shifts. She stared at the ceiling for long minutes. Something was stirring inside her. The feeling that her story was only a part of a much darker plot. On the third day, Beatrice handed her a folded envelope. You didn't see this with me, she said without looking at her. I don't know why I trust you, but something tells me you need to know. Eleanor waited until she was completely alone. She locked the bathroom door and opened the envelope. Inside was a yellowed, photocopied sheet with a name that made her tremble. Leonor Gutierrez Sterling. Her mother was alive. The medical records said she had been admitted 15 years ago. Diagnosis: chronic delusional disorder, severe emotional instability, risk to self and others. Signed by Victor Sterling as legal guardian. Eleanor felt the ground move beneath her feet. She breathed hard, but tears fell without permission. She couldn't believe it. She didn't want to believe it. Her mother, whom Victor had said died in an accident, was locked in that clinic. Diagnosed as unstable. Sedated, silenced. She read the document 10 times. She checked the dates. It coincided with the year her father died, and Victor took complete control of the family business. She was barely 20 years old. All that time, she believed her mother was dead, that she had passed away peacefully, that there was nothing more to seek. At 3 a.m, Eleanor walked the corridors in silence. She knew the cameras didn't cover the C-wing after a certain hour. Beatrice had told her the system was old, that no one reviewed the recordings, and there had been no incidents. She entered the restricted wing with a card she had taken from a doctor's keyring. Her steps were light, but her heart pounded as if trying to escape her chest. She searched room by room until she found her. Room 218. She opened the door slowly. The light of a dim lamp revealed a thin figure with gray hair. She was sitting in a chair by the window. She was looking out without moving. She wasn't wearing a gown. Her clothes were simple but clean. Her hands rested in her lap. Eleanor approached without saying a word. The woman turned her face slowly. Her eyes were clear, alive, full of something she couldn't identify. When she saw her, she said nothing, just looked at her. "Mom," Eleanor whispered, barely audible. The woman blinked. A subtle movement. Nothing more. "Is that you?" Leonor asked in a dry voice. "Yes, it's me, Eleanor." A thick silence filled the room. "I knew you would come. Sooner or later." He couldn't hide everything. Eleanor fell to her knees beside her. She took her hands, crying silently. "They told me you died. Victor told me. He said you were in a car, that it was instantaneous." Leonor squeezed her hand. "Victor is a viper disguised as a husband. He committed me here with false documents. He said it was for my mental health, that I was paranoid, that I was seeing things. But I only did one thing. Told him I knew what he was doing with your father, with the company, with the accounts. And he locked me up." Eleanor couldn't stop crying. They weren't soft tears. They were punches, lightning bolts coming from within. "I never knew. I didn't ask. I didn't see. I was a child. I trusted him. It's not your fault. It's his. For lying, for manipulating, for stealing the truth from you." They embraced for several minutes. Without words. Time could not be recovered, but there was something stronger than that. The certainty that not everything was lost. Before leaving, Eleanor promised her that she would return, that she would get her out of there, that the story was not going to end with silence. The next day, she requested a week's leave from the clinic. She said she had a family emergency. No one asked further. She left with a clean face, tearless, but with an organized fury inside her chest. She returned to the foundation, hugged Ethan, looked for Martha, observed Veronica without saying anything. She was no longer the same. That night, she wrote in her notebook, "Victor didn't just steal my money, he stole my mother. He stole years of love and used his foundation as a laboratory. He experimented with vulnerable bodies, with people without a voice. I am going to speak. I am going to shout. Not with violence, but with truth. And this time the world will listen." The war had begun, and Eleanor was no longer afraid. It wasn't revenge that drove her. It was justice. And not an abstract justice of courts and codes. It was real justice, made with the truth of the forgotten, those who didn't appear in the news, those who didn't have sonorous surnames or lawyers on call. For the first time in her life, Eleanor didn't want to hide. She wanted to expose herself. But not yet, not without evidence. The silenced voice goes public. For weeks, she dedicated herself to collecting everything that could be useful. She returned to the clinic, this time with a new purpose, to document. With the help of Beatrice, the nurse who had introduced her to the place's secrets, she managed to enter the physical patient archives. A hidden basement behind an unmarked door, where thousands of medical folders, admission forms, treatment reports, and documents with signatures that repeated too often slept. Beatrice only gave her 10 minutes. No more. Eleanor took photos with her old phone, knowing that each image could mean a silenced life. She found names of missing women, children without family history, medical tests that should never have been performed, doses of experimental drugs. The most chilling, contracts signed by supposed relatives authorizing the procedures. all under the seal of the Sterling Foundation. One night, back in her room at the foundation, she opened a folder she had been avoiding for days. Her mother's complete file. Photographs included signatures of doctors she never knew, psychiatric reports so manipulated that they were grotesque. Eleanor was not sick, she was just inconvenient. The next phase was more complex. Eleanor began to record testimonies in secret, using a small recorder hidden in her purse. The interviews were intimate, painful. Some women spoke for the first time in years. Others only agreed to do so if their names were not revealed. Veronica was one of the first to speak. Victor asked me to abort when I told him I was pregnant. He offered me money. He said he didn't want scandals. When I refused, he isolated me, took away my job, left me with nothing. The only thing he agreed to was to pay for a clinic for the birth and have me sign a silence agreement. Did you know what he was doing with the foundation? I knew something wasn't right. People without names entered. Fewer left than entered. I saw children with unapproved medications, women with severe side effects. But I kept quiet. I was afraid, and I had a daughter to support. Rosa also gave her testimony. She had returned to the foundation after disappearing for several days. She had marks on her arms, dull eyes, but she returned determined. My husband worked with one of the laboratories that Victor's clinics used. He discovered irregularities. When he confronted him, they fired him. They beat me to silence me. They threatened to take my daughters away. That's why I left. But I'm not afraid anymore. Ethan recorded his testimony in drawings. He couldn't write well, but he painted as if his soul guided him. He made a series of crayon drawings that showed hospitals, needles, faces without eyes, gray figures. Eleanor scanned them all and saved them. With all the collected material, she created a YouTube channel. She used a pseudonym, The Silenced Voice. The logo was simple, a female face with her mouth covered by a broken bandage. She didn't give her name. She didn't show her face. The first video was direct, recorded in a voiceover with her voice barely distorted. There are stories that don't fit in courtrooms. There are crimes that don't leave blood but do leave scars. This is the story of a powerful man, a philanthropist, a businessman, a monster. The video included fragments of the testimonies, images of the documents, distorted audios. Nothing sensational, all real, all with evidence. In the first 24 hours, the video had 1,000 views, then 10,000, then 100,000. Social media began to ignite. Some believed, others doubted, but everyone was talking, and that was what mattered. She posted a second video, then a third. In one of them, she showed Victor Sterling's name for the first time, unfiltered, unprotected. It was only a matter of time before the media became interested. First the alternative media, then the major ones, until an investigative journalist, known for exposing corruption networks, wrote her a direct email. I want to talk to you. I have more pieces. And you have the story everyone needs to hear. Her name was Dana Riley. She was 42, had an unimpeachable reputation, and several enemies in government. They met at a coffee shop on the outskirts of the city. Eleanor went in a wig and dark glasses. She wasn't ready to show her face yet. I tracked you down after the second video, Dana said. What you're doing is bigger than you think. It's not just Victor. There are politicians, judges, businessmen. This man has tentacles everywhere, but he also has cracks. And you found one. I want to bring it all to light, but carefully. I don't want to become famous. I want the victims to speak, for what they tried to silence to be heard. Then let's do it together. You give me access to what you have. I'll take care of the rest. And I propose something else, a documentary. Complete, raw, real, but this time with your face, your name, your story. Eleanor lowered her gaze. I don't know if I'm ready. No one ever is. But if you don't do it, they will, and they'll tell your story as it suits them. You have the control now, don't let go of it. Victor began to feel the blow. Contracts started to fall apart. Investors withdrew their money. The press stopped treating him as a philanthropist and started investigating him as a suspect. An international network canceled his participation in an event. 2 companies broke million-dollar agreements. One of his partners, fearing being dragged into the collapse, reported him for falsification of signatures. Another disappeared from the country. Veronica, seeing she had nothing left to lose, decided to show her face. She recorded a video from the foundation with Chloe by her side. I am Veronica Lopez. I was Victor Sterling's partner. Our daughter is sick. He used her to clean up his image, and then disappeared. He doesn't pay for her treatments. He doesn't call. He doesn't ask. This is the man who claims to love his family. The video went viral in a matter of hours. Chloe, pale and without hair, became a symbol of injustice. Thousands of people donated for her medicine. Television programs invited her. An international foundation offered support. And Eleanor was still waiting. She knew her moment was near. That night, Dana called her on a video call. There was no introduction, only a question. "Are you ready?" Eleanor looked at her intently, took a deep breath, and said, "Let's do it. I want to tell my full story with my name, with my face, without fear." Dana smiled. The awakening of the silenced voice had no turning back, and this time, the world would not be able to ignore her. The End of the Empire. The documentary was titled The Silence of the Privileged, an ironic, powerful name, designed to shatter the immaculate image of those who use power to cover up crimes under donations and charitable foundations. It premiered on an international platform, but it was also uploaded freely to YouTube. There was no advertising, no sponsors, just truth, without makeup, without unnecessary cuts. The story unfolded in chapters. The first began with an image of Eleanor in close-up, looking at the camera, tearless, makeup-free, unedited. Just her, complete for the first time. The phrase with which she opened the video was burned into millions of minds. "I was dead for years, and no one noticed. Now that I have come back to life, I don't plan to keep quiet." Eleanor told everything. From the first day, from the Christmas night to the disappearance, the neighborhood, the foundation, the clinic, the experiments, the lie. Dana, the journalist, had done an impeccable job. She had not only documented Eleanor's testimony, but also obtained legal records, data cross-references, clinical files, victim testimonies, and even an undercover interview with a former doctor from the Sterling Foundation. Everything was exposed. There was no way to deny it. The reaction was immediate. Social networks exploded, opinion channels, political talk shows. Everyone was talking about her. Victor Sterling's name went from being synonymous with successful businessman to a symbol of corruption, structural violence, and abuse of power. Newspaper headlines changed their tone. They no longer spoke of a broken marriage or a missing wife, but of crimes. Crimes disguised as philanthropy, crimes that had been unpunished for years. Victor watched the documentary from his office, locked inside with a distorted face. The phone wouldn't stop ringing. Messages, emails, alerts. His partners abandoned him one by one. Contracts were canceled. Investments were frozen. His main lawyer publicly resigned from the case. And then came what he least expected: the leak. A phone call, one of those he himself had ordered recorded to protect himself, came to light. A conversation between him and one of his advisors, where he clearly said, "The only thing stopping me from killing her is the press. If there weren't cameras, I would have made her disappear once and for all." The call was broadcast by every newscast. The scandal stopped being just legal. It became moral. It became social. Victor tried to flee the country. He boarded a private jet bound for a country without an extradition treaty. He didn't make it. He was arrested before takeoff. The image of his arrest traveled the world. They took him off the plane in handcuffs, without a tie, powerless. For the first time, he couldn't pretend. Eleanor saw it on television. She didn't feel joy nor pity. She felt a strange emptiness, as if a part of her story was closing on its own, as if it no longer belonged to her. But there was still something she couldn't leave undone. Days after the arrest, she requested a visit to the prison where Victor had been detained. The news leaked, and the media waited outside. She entered without speaking. She dressed simply. No brands, no jewelry. Just a woman facing a man she had loved, feared, endured, and confronted. Victor was on the other side of the glass, thinner, with dark circles, but still with that barely disguised air of arrogance. "So here you are," he said without greeting. "Happy?" Eleanor observed him without blinking. "I didn't come looking for satisfaction. I came to tell you what I never said, what I kept quiet while you spoke for both of us. And what do you think you'll achieve now? Redemption? Fame? No. I don't need that anymore. I needed the truth, and I have it now. You do too, even if you don't recognize it." Victor leaned forward. "You are ungrateful. I gave you everything. A life anyone would envy. You gave me a cage with diamonds. But it was still a cage. And now what? Are you happy?" Eleanor lowered her gaze, thought for a few seconds, and then replied calmly. "No. But I am no longer afraid. And that is much more valuable than any superficial happiness you could buy for me." She got up. He said nothing more. He just watched her leave. Outside, the media waited for her. Microphones, cameras, flashes. Someone shouted, "What did he say to you? Are you satisfied with his downfall?" Eleanor didn't respond. She got into the car with Dana and left, but her face was already everywhere. Society was divided. Some called her brave, a heroine, the voice of those who could never speak. Others accused her of being an opportunist, of exposing her family, of destroying a legacy. The comments were extreme. "Thank you for daring. I wish you had spoken sooner. You are light in the darkness. You just want attention." Eleanor read every word, the good and the cruel, and she didn't defend herself. She learned that the one who tells the truth doesn't need to justify it every minute. New victims began to appear. A woman in the south of the country revealed that she had lost her son after an experimental treatment at a clinic belonging to the Sterling Group. A young man testified that his mother was admitted without a real diagnosis. A remorseful doctor leaked a list of names that had been falsely diagnosed to be used as test patients. The case grew like fire in dry grass. Justice could not look away. New investigations were opened, accounts were frozen, collaborators were arrested. The tentacles of the empire began to be cut. The Samuel Foundation. At the foundation, Eleanor returned as one of them. She didn't feel superior. She continued washing dishes, organizing clothes, playing with the children. Ethan waited with new drawings every day. His health continued to deteriorate, but his spirit remained strong. One morning, Martha called her to the patio. "This arrived for you," she said, handing her a small envelope sealed with light blue tape. It was Ethan's handwriting. Eleanor felt a lump in her throat. She opened the envelope with trembling hands. Inside was a letter written with the help of someone else. The calligraphy was uneven, but every word was full of intention. "Dear Eleanor, if you are reading this, it's because I've already gone. Don't be sad. I'm not scared. You taught me that you can fight without shouting, that big people are also afraid, but some overcome it. I want to be like you. When you are sad, remember this. There are living people who are more dead than I am, and there are dead people who live on in every person who fights. Thank you for listening to me when no one else would. Loves, Ethan." Eleanor didn't cry at that moment. She held the letter against her chest, took a deep breath, and looked at the sky. That night, alone in her room, she cried uncontrollably, not just for Ethan, but for everything he represented. For the injustice, for the abandonment, for the broken lives, for the children who shouldn't die so young. The next day, she made a decision. She would found an organization in Ethan's name, not as a shelter, but as a trench for women, for children, for those no one wanted to see, because Victor's downfall was not the end. It was just the beginning of something much bigger. And for the first time, she was ready to lead it. Eleanor knew it wasn't about punishing a man, or cleaning up a surname, or even redeeming herself for having been silent for so long. The objective was different, deeper, more human. It was about giving a voice to those who always lived in the shadows, proving that wounds could be transformed into trenches, that pain, properly channeled, was a force as powerful as any empire. The days following Ethan's death were difficult. The entire foundation seemed wrapped in a strange silence, as if the absence of his laughter had left the air suspended. The women avoided talking too much. The children played with less energy. Martha cried alone in the kitchen. Veronica spent the night sitting at the entrance, holding Chloe. Eleanor did not cry in public. She locked herself in with the letter in her hands and allowed herself to feel in silence. When she read it aloud for the first time, her voice trembled. Sometimes we who suffer don't seek revenge, we just want someone to see us. She reread the phrase many times. It was so simple and so brutally true. That had been all. Ethan did not ask for justice or revenge or miracles. He only asked to be seen, to be heard, to be recognized as more than a diagnosis, more than a number, and she had given it to him. In her own way, she had fulfilled her promise. In honor of that, and of every child and woman who had crossed her path, Eleanor decided to found an organization. She called it the Ethan Foundation. It didn't have large offices. It started in the same community foundation building with the same chairs, the same old pots, the same donated mattresses, but it had a new name and a clear mission: to give visibility to the invisible. Her story had gone viral. The documentary continued to rack up views, but she decided to distance herself from the cameras. She rejected interviews, editorial contracts, offers to write books or star in movies. She didn't want to become a celebrity of pain. She didn't need to be admired. She only wanted to be useful. Every week, she received letters, women telling her their stories. Some wanted justice. Others just asked that someone listen to them. People from distant countries, from forgotten neighborhoods, from cities with impossible names to pronounce. There was a global network of suffering, and also a network of hope. Because every shared story ignited another. Chloe, Victor's daughter, went into remission. The experimental treatment she received thanks to donations had worked. Her hair began to grow back, thin and curly. Her eyes were no longer dull. Veronica, although tired, smiled again. One day, Chloe approached Eleanor while they were organizing boxes of food. "Can I ask you something?" "Anything you want. I want to help at the foundation, but not as the sick girl. I want to help as someone useful." Eleanor looked at her tenderly. "From today on, you are our ambassador. Not because you were a victim, but because you survived. And that is already a form of struggle." Chloe became the visible face of the foundation. Her voice in conferences, her face in campaigns, her story as a banner. She spoke with a maturity that disarmed adults, with a clarity that cut through the noise of political speeches. She didn't talk about her father. She didn't name him. It wasn't necessary. Eleanor, for her part, chose conscious anonymity. She moved back to a simple neighborhood. She rented a small apartment with a terrace overlooking the sea. She didn't hang expensive paintings. She didn't buy designer furniture. She had only what was necessary: a wooden table, a firm bed, a shelf full of underlined books, and her notebook. Every night she wrote in it, not to publish but to remember. She noted names, phrases, fragments of stories she heard at the foundation. Sometimes she scribbled loose thoughts or poems that no one would read. One November night, when the wind was blowing hard and the sea was pounding angrily, she sat on the terrace with a cup of tea and a blank sheet of paper. She felt it was the moment. She no longer needed to talk to the world. She wanted to talk to herself. She wrote calmly, as if every word had been waiting to come out for years. "I did not die that Christmas. I was born, and I will never be silent again." The phrase made her close her eyes. She felt it in her chest, in her throat, on her skin. It was the truth. That night, in front of the lit tree, with Victor's poisonous phrase still floating in the air, something inside her broke, but not to die but to reborn. She was not the same. She would not go back. She put the sheet in her notebook, leaned back in the chair, and looked at the starless sky, but with a moon that seemed more present than ever. Days later, she returned to the New Life Clinic. Not as a patient, not as an infiltrator. She went with a lawyer, with a legal order, with a release request signed by a judge. Eleanor, her mother, was received by her at the entrance. She was dressed in white, the same color in which Victor had buried her alive, but her eyes no longer held resignation. They held memory. "Is it real this time?" Eleanor asked. "Yes, Mom, it's real. No one else is going to decide for you." She hugged her tightly. The hug they were robbed of for 15 years. Neither of them said more. It wasn't necessary. They settled Eleanor in a small house near the beach. It was discreet, quiet, with a garden where she could plant flowers as she liked when Eleanor was a child. Every week, she received visits from Chloe, Veronica, Martha. Sometimes she sat with the foundation's children to tell invented stories. Other times, she simply knitted in silence, as if mending the threads of time. The trial against Victor was prolonged. His defense tried to declare him mentally unstable. It didn't work. The evidence was overwhelming, the testimonies crushing. He was sentenced to 32 years in prison for fraud, illegal medical experimentation, abuse of power, and attempted homicide. During the sentencing, Eleanor did not attend. She watched it on television from her living room with a blanket over her legs and a notebook in her hands. When the judge read the sentence, she closed her eyes and whispered a word. Enough. It was the end of one story and the beginning of another. Months passed. The foundation grew, received international support, new branches opened, alliances were formed with human rights organizations, health centers, universities. But Eleanor remained in her place. She didn't want to be a director, a symbol, or a public figure. She wanted to remain among the people, listening, touching the pain without fear, planting silences that would bear fruit. In a letter she wrote as a closing statement, addressed to no one in particular, she left her last public words. Dana read it at a foundation event. The journalist's voice trembled at times, but she didn't break. "We all have a story that hurts. Some hide it, others shout it. I learned to walk with mine. They told me I was weak for feeling so much, that I was dramatic for not being quiet, that I was ungrateful for pointing fingers, but I was not born to adorn a lie. I was born to unearth the truth. To those who are suffering in silence today, I just want to say this: you are not alone. And even if no one else listens to you, listen to yourself. Your story matters. Your pain matters. Your life matters. Silence is not peace, it is just fear disguised. And you were not created to fear. You were created to shine, even if it hurts." Eleanor didn't go to that event. She was at home, sitting in front of the sea, writing another letter. This time for Ethan. I promised you I would continue, and here I am. Sometimes I feel tired. Sometimes I want to leave everything, but then I remember your laughter, your drawings, your questioning gaze, and I get up, because there are still many who need to be seen, and I still have much to see. The sea roared in front of her. The same sea she had seen when she escaped, the same one that now received her without fear. She closed the notebook, remained silent, and smiled. It wasn't happiness. It was freedom. Reading your comments makes us feel closer to you. And if you haven't already, hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell. Every gesture you make is a sign that these stories need to keep being told. Don't go yet. Our next moving story is already appearing on your screen. Click on any of them and keep exploring this universe of real, touching, and necessary tales. Thank you for being here. Thank you for feeling with us. We send you a huge hug wherever you are. See you in the next one.